In this video, we're going to learn how to publish a web API into Azure, and also we're going to learn how to configure managed identities so that we can connect our web API into a Azure SQL database. So let's get started. Here we have a minimal API. It is a very simple API. As you can see, we configure Entity Framework Core. We have this application DB context here that has some default data and also a people table. Again, very simple stuff. We have this entity here with ID and name. And also here, as we said, we're configuring the application DB context, and we have this single endpoint that allows us to get the information from the people table. Again, very simple stuff. The idea here is that we want to publish this web API into Azure. And by the way, if you want to learn more about how to build minimal APIs using Entity Framework Core, buy my Udemy course today. There is a link with a discount in the description of this video. Alright, so back to the tutorial. So let's come here. And I want to publish this into Azure, so let me say here publish. Let's click on Azure. Next, we can use either Azure Service Windows or Linux. I can use Windows if we want to, so next. And of course, I am assuming that you have a Azure account in order to be able to deploy the web API into Azure. So let's come here. I want to create a new Azure App Service. The Azure App Service is the instance in which we are going to host our web API. We can leave this name as it is. I can choose my subscription. I can create a new resource group so that we can have our resources put in a single place. So I can say here, demo, publish, Azure, okay, and we can create a new hosting plan. The hosting plan represents the location of my server. In my case, East US is fine, and the size will be V1. Of course, the more powerful the server is, the more expensive it is going to be. So V1 is fine by me. Alright, so okay, and I can click on create. This is simply creating the Azure App Service, the place in which we're going to put our web API. This is still not publishing the web API. We're going to do that in a few minutes. So let's wait. Alright, so this has been created, so I can click on here and click on finish. Alright, so here we are in the publish profile page, and here we can configure the service dependencies like our SQL Server database in Azure. So let's do that. Let's click on here, connect. Let's choose Azure SQL Database because I want my SQL database in the cloud. So next, I want to create a new one. So click on here. I can leave this name as it is. And in database server, we can create a new server. So let's click on here. I need to put here a username and a password. Please make sure to save that information safely. So okay, and create. Again, with this, what we're doing is that we're creating the database server and the Azure SQL database in Azure. So let's wait a few minutes. Alright, so this has been created. So let's click on next. And as we can see here, before, if you remember, if you have done this in the past, we were able to have a connection string here with the username and password. Now, that is not the case anymore. Now, what we're advised to do is to configure managed identity so that in our connection string, we don't have a username and password, but instead what we do is that we configure our Azure App Service so that it is able to connect to our SQL database. And that is what we're going to do. As you can see here, by the way, you can see that we have authentication. This is the connection string. We have authentication active directory default, which means that, yeah, we don't have a username and password here. So you can indeed even take this connection string away from me, and you're not going to be able to connect to my Azure SQL database. This means that this is now more secure, because even if you leak your connection string, nobody is going to be able to do anything with it. Alright, so something that I have to do here in the connection string name is that in my case, my connection string name is default connection. Alright, so I will put that here, and let me click on next, and let me uncheck this because I already have the necessary Nugget packages installed. I can leave this and click on finish. Now, as I was saying before, we can only connect to our SQL database from our Azure App Service using this connection string. This means that we're not going to be able to run our migrations from here, from Visual Studio, using that connection string. So we have two options. The first option is to simply change the connection string and put the username and password. If we don't want to do that, something else that we can do is that we can run the migrations from the program class at the startup of our application. Let's see first what I'm referring to. Before, in the past, we're able to simply come here. Here we have discovering data contexts. And as you can see here, I can come here. And here we have our connection string. Again, in the past, we used to have username and password here. And therefore, I was able to click on here and apply the migrations of EF Core into my production SQL database when I click on publish here. But that is not the case anymore, because here we don't have username and password, but what we have is authentication, Active Directory, manage identity. From here, we're not going to be able to modify our SQL database in production, therefore this will fail. So I will uncheck this, and what I will do is that I can click on cancel because I didn't change anything. What I can do is that I can come back to the program class, and here after bar app builder build, what I can do is that I can apply the migrations from here. So let me say using bar scope equal to app services, create a scope, and with this scope, we're going to be able to get a reference to the DB context, to the application DB context. So let me say here scope, service provider, get required service, and I will put here my DB context, which is called application DB context. And then I can say if DB context database is relational, only if the database is relational is that I want to apply my migrations. And this allows me to, if I have integration test that uses Entity Framework Core in memory provider, then those tests will not fail, thanks to this code that I'm adding here. Alright, so let me say now DB context database migrate, and this migrate will apply the migrations. Alright, so let's come back here to the publish profile and let's click on publish. Now, this will get my Web API published, but it will still not work because we have to configure the connection between my Azure App Service and my Azure SQL Database. So let's do that. Let's come here to portal.azure.com. Let's come to resource groups. While this is working, we're going to be doing that configuration. So let's come to demo publish Azure. I want to look for my SQL Server instance here. So click on here. I want to come to Microsoft Entra Admin. Click on here. This is, by the way, in settings, Microsoft Entra Admin, because I want to be able to connect to my Azure SQL Database using my Azure credentials. So for that, I will click on here, set admin. I will look for myself here. If you don't see yourself here, you can always write your name. So in my case, Felipe, and I have myself here, so I can click on here, select, and save me as an admin. Alright, so with this, I will be able to connect to my Azure SQL Database using my Azure credentials, and that will allow me to add my Azure App Service as a user of the database. For that, first, I need to come here because I need the name of my Azure App Service, and we can get that from here. So copy this, I will put it into Notepad, and by the way, this is the Azure App Service connecting, loading. This means that the publish was successful, but the application won't load because we still haven't configured the connection. So let's continue working. By the way, something that we need to do is to come here to identity and make sure that this is on. This is what will allow me to connect from Azure App Service to the SQL database using a managed identity. Alright, so this is on, so I don't have to change anything from here. So now let's come back here to demo publish Azure to my resource group. Now let's come to the SQL database because I want to add my Azure App Service as a user of the database. So let's come to query editor and let me say allow IP to allow my IP. This is done. Now let's click on continue as myself, and what this allows me to do is to put this query here, create user, your app service name from external provider, alter rule, DB owner, add member, your app service name. So here I have to put my app service name, which we put in this notepad. So let me copy that and paste that here and also here. And that will create my Azure App Service as a user with necessary permissions to modify my database and also use it, consume it, run queries against it. So let's click on run. And as you can see, this was successful. And let's come back here and we're going to see that the app failed to start. That is because when we try to run this application, the connection between our Azure SQL Database and the Azure App Service was still not established. Now, this thing that we did here this create user that we did here usually takes a few minutes in order to be able to use it. So therefore, we have to wait around 3 minutes in order to be able to come here, refresh the application, and then we're going to see that it will work. So let's wait 3 minutes. So I will forward the video. Alright, so 3 minutes has passed. So let me refresh here. And as you can see, it is going to display another error, a 404, because we don't have anything at the root of our web API. But this means that the fact that we have another error, it means that we're able to connect to our SQL database. So let's come to a real endpoint here, API/people, that will connect to our people table, enter. And as you can see, we're able to indeed fetch some data from our people table. So indeed, we're able to publish a web API into Azure and then use managed identities to configure the connection between that Azure App Service instance and our Azure SQL database. If you want to learn how to do a CRUD using Entity Framework Core and a minimal API, watch this video that I'm showing on the screen. Thank you.